Awesome. All right. Welcome. This is the Uncommon Sense podcast. I am your host, Blake. Today with me, I have a buddy who I've known for a little while. We did a TV show together.
Yeah.
You can catch it on Netflix, Blue Mountain State. You may see a bunch of weird gawky guys in the background who are too tall for their own good. That would be me and my buddy here, Moe. Moe is a reporter. You can hear him on TSN 990.
TSN 690.
690. Right. Sorry, we changed. That's right. Sorry,
yeah, we changed it a few years ago. Yeah.
TSN 690. He is a commentator for the FPF League, the Flag Plus Football League, which is a huge success here in Quebec. He knows a lot about sports. He knows a lot about the people in sports. So, hey, welcome, Moe. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Blake. Appreciate it, brother.
Okay, so obviously 2020 has been a very weird year, to say the least. We've had a lot of weird things, and I think one of the things that we were all kind of dreading, at least from athletes and sports enthusiasts wise, is the loss of our entertainment. Meaning, the loss of baseball, the loss of basketball, football, soccer, rugby, all the major sports. We thought that there was no way that this was going to go on during a global pandemic. But lo and behold, everybody kind of got their shit together, and leagues have been still going on. Basketball was in a bubble. I think they pretty much made the blueprint for how this whole thing kind of went down. Baseball, I don't want to say baseball shat the bed, but they definitely probably didn't do it as clean as they probably should have. Soccer is going strong right now. They seem to have a hold, which is, to me, amazement on how international league can somehow manage to keep all those guys healthy,
right,
and COVID free. I mean, that's I don't know how they do or how they're doing it, but man, it's amazing. And football has been a little bit of that middle tier where they've gotten some things right, still got a couple of infections, but they seem to be going strong, still pushing it. They pushed a couple of games, but from your standpoint, obviously reporting sports for a living. How do you feel it's been going on for this weird COVID year that we're dealing with?
It's pretty crazy, Blake, because obviously you're right that when I do field reporting, when I go to practices, whether it's locally with the Canadians or the Alouettes or Montreal Impact, definitely felt it now because we've not been physically at a practice facility for a good 7-8 months, right? And even when we had the restarts for the Impact and for the Canadians back in the summertime, even that was sort of a Brinks like truck access that you need to have certain access to get in, go through their protocols and whatnot, and just to minimize more than having more than one person from the same media company go. It was sort of like, well, if our lead guy goes, I'll back him up if he doesn't want to go.
Right.
And so it's been a long time since I've been at an actual practice, and it definitely was surreal to see how the world definitely shut down, and just in general, right, with everyday life, of how we have to readjust, wearing masks, washing our hands more often, keeping our distance. And I think for sports, once it went down, right, back in March, that there was going to be no sports, it definitely was a different feeling because you look at how it is at that time of year, right? We had March Madness. Golf was about to begin. Baseball was about to begin. NBA, NHL playoffs, NFL draft. Those are all big events that we all love once the winter is behind us, going towards the spring months.
Right.
And for that to not happen or not to materialize definitely was a shock to the system because we're all sports guys, or most of us are.
Yeah, of
and
course.
Not to have that, to enjoy on a Monday night or on a weekend where you're watching 85 million games of playoff hockey or basketball.
Exactly.
Definitely was an adjustment. And look, at the end of the day, Blake, the reality is we all have to be in this together. And all these athletes are just like us. They have families. They're humans, right? Mm-hmm. So they're taking their risks themselves, putting themselves in this position where if they go in a bubble or if they're going on a road trip, heaven forbid they get COVID, well, guess what? You can't go and see your kids or your wife or your parents, whatever it is at that moment. So it definitely has their risks, but just from a covering perspective, I definitely felt it. It was an adjustment doing Zoom calls, with the Canadians, Impact, and Alouettes,
right,
and not being there physically to understand the moment, the emotions of the person you're interviewing, of how they're feeling, was an adjustment for everyone involved.
Right, and so when I'm watching football and I'm watching these guys have their press conferences, they're forced to have to do, like you said, do it through Zoom, where they've shown a couple of pictures. If you watched Hard Knocks with Jalen Ramsey when he loses his shit on a couple of reporters because they keep asking him the same question, they show the footage of him talking to basically a Zoom call where there's like 20 reporters on the same screen. What is that like as someone who's reporting on sports? I mean, I'm sure it's hard enough to ask your questions when you're all in the same room in front of an athlete, but to talk to an athlete when they're sitting in front of a screen of like 20 of you, where you can't get the feel of, who's asking what questions, or if everybody, you know what I mean? Like you can't get that feeling on when I'm supposed to kind of like chime in with a question here. Like, what is that like now, trying to deal with that scenario?
It's an adjustment, because when we're doing media scrums in a locker room, you have a feel for that athlete. And if I ask player A, hey, you got hit by so-and-so and you only had 2 goals, I can ask a follow-up, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in this context of Zoom, not saying that it's happened, but the person, the PR guy has control of the mic, right? They can mute you right away. So you kind of have to kind of lay it out early. Say, hey, a couple questions for you, Joe Schmo. Hey, this is what happened, and then I ask my second question right afterwards. Right. But again, this is not to be there to develop that rapport with that athlete, because in the line that we work in, you never want your question to be too wordy, right? Where you're answering the question for that athlete. And you want it to be a minimal question, so they answer it with a question, with a response that makes them act comfortable, at ease, and also more importantly, though, they can respect that. Hey, this is a good question. Let's have the follow up right away.
Right.
Because in the case of Jalen Ramsey, right, watching that HBO Hard Knocks thing, they asked him that question in different variations, and that peeved him off. Right. He's like, "Bleep this. I'm out of here. Don't bother with me." And then he came back, 10 minutes later. But the point is that the Zoom definitely has its limitations, because you're not in that environment of understanding that situation after a practice, after a game. Whereas when you're in that environment, it's like, okay, cool, let's ask her a question. And if they answer it, you get the best of the best, because it's in that heat of the moment. Whereas now it's sort of, you're being controlled a little bit, because if you have one question, it better be a really good question, because you won't get a second question to follow up.
Okay. And what was the other thing I was really? Oh yeah. So when you're talking to these athletes, and you're trying to obviously the idea is to build a relationship with these guys, so that when you do, after the game, after whatever, it's not like this weird kind of awkward situation where you kind of have to be like, do you mind if I ask you some questions and whatever? Like, when you get on that like first name basis where you're like, hey, so-and-so, like, how's it going? Yeah. He's like, listen, man, you mind if I ask him some questions about what went on? He's like, yeah, sure. Of course. It's you. Of course. How do you facilitate that relationship to where you can kind of build trust with athletes, so that they know that you're not going to kind of, like tabloid them? Like, you're not going to try to.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's sort of, it's the way it is, Blake. Like, I won't name athletes that have developed friendships with,
right? I wouldn't want
but the way that I worked with some of these athletes is that you try to connect with them, not like in a brown-nosing way, but in a way that you want them to be at ease, right? So, I remember one athlete that I'm still very good friends with now. We connected because I'd asked him a question on Twitter, and then he started to follow me, and vice versa. And he told me, like, we became good friends out of it. But, from a media perspective, he said to me, he goes, look, Mo, you and 2 others are the only ones I trust with when it comes to media stuff. Right. Because it's not, I'm looking at him looking for a salacious story, but hey, can you tell me why your GM cut this guy? Or can you tell me what did the quarterback say to you guys at halftime of a football game because you were down by 45 against your rival? It's more like you want them to be at ease. So that means you kind of connect with them on a different level of, well, hey, you're from this area, so are you a fan of this team, right? So you kind of go outside the box of what they know,
Okay.
And that's how you start to develop that rapport. Like, there's athletes have other interests in sports, right? Whether they're NFL fans, if you're an NHL guy. There's a lot of soccer fans who play in different sports like NBA, NFL, NHL. And I remember one time, I'll give you a good example. Last year at the Canadians opening media day that they have, I was wearing my Liverpool top, and there's a lot of European athletes that play for the Canadians, and they're big time European football fans, that they call out there. And they saw it, right? And then they started poking fun at me for wearing Liverpool stuff. I go, "Who's your team?" They go, "Oh, we're Arsenal, we're Spurs," right? And that's how you start to develop the rapport, because throughout the course of that season, you can always bring it up to them. Hey, listen, your team lost 2-1 to so-and-so. Yeah. Then that's how they feel more at ease. So it's kind of finding the outside the box questions or links that maybe they might feel more at ease to talk to you about. Right. And that's how you slowly develop that rapport, where you say, well, look, I'm not asking for any insider information, but at least I know that I can come to you if I have a question or two about a certain situation that might have evolved with your team, whether it's hockey, football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is, that you might be able to shed light on from my coverage of your team.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's interesting, because I think a lot of people wonder, like, how do you develop like this, how do you develop that rapport with athletes? Because I mean, even when I was in college, I used to hate to talk to reporters, because I remember the one year I transferred back to Concordia.
Yeah.
I had a French reporter ask me a bunch of questions, and at first, I mean, I'd been in the States, so like I was a nobody. You know what I mean? Like when you go there, there's a bunch of guys who are way better than me. So when they wanted to highlight me, I was like, okay, cool, fine. Like I'll answer. But when he was asking me questions, he was asking me a lot of very, like, I don't want to say they were vague questions, but I felt like he was trying to lead me somewhere into saying something.
Right.
And then when the article did come out, it kind of made me seem pompous, like I was an American, like I was coming over from America. Oh, I'm coming to play Canadian football now, big deal, whatever. Right. Yeah, I played CIS or whatever. When it wasn't that case at all. So I was like, okay, well, this guy's a little bit of a jerk. That's not very. But I know a lot of guys who I know who played ball have that kind of same fear of that whatever they're going to say is being taken out of context. And I can only imagine now in 2020, especially being like, clickbait and everything, everybody wants to put things out on Twitter and like, just these little hooks to get people not necessarily in trouble, but to get, their 2 seconds of fame or whatever. I can only imagine it's probably pretty hard to kind of get that rapport with athletes right now, because they're probably guarded as far as like who you're talking to, make sure you're talking to the right guy or the wrong guy. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So,
well, especially now, right, with Instagram and Twitter and camera phones, right? It's sort of that you kind of have to keep your guard up and you have to go off track here. One of my media colleagues who works, at a pretty big network. I remember one time we went out, just for drinks and just to hang out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I can't be any background photos of any like group shots that are being taken, right? At a club and whatever it is. And he said, I asked, like, why? He goes, look, Mo, like at the end of the day, if by being the wrong place, wrong time, you end up in a background shot and it pops up on social media, well, so-and-so was at this club. What was he doing there? Was he part of this group, right? Then you get the questions from your superiors.
Right.
So you always got to be careful. And that's what athletes always tell me, that they always are aware of the surroundings to make sure that, hey, if you're taking a picture, at least I know I'm with person A, B, and C, and not some background shot where people are going to assume, well, look, he was at this club last night. What was he doing the night before? Whatever it is, right? So there's a lot of being aware of your surroundings to make sure you understand where you're at in the ecosystem of what you're trying to do on an everyday basis.
For sure, you can understand that. And so, in saying all that, when did you get started in in being reporting? Like, how did you decide that maybe this is something I'm gonna try to get into? Because I can only imagine it's like, playing sports is hard enough, but then being good enough and reputable enough to, be featured, on networks, the radio, in the paper, and having people take your opinion seriously. I mean, that's got to be a hard ladder to climb.
It definitely is, Blake. It's a grind, man. Like, broadcasting is not one of those things where you walk in and, hey, you're going to be doing NFL on Fox, Cowboys versus Seahawks week 2, right?
Right.
It's not that. It's a grind, man. And people don't understand that that beneath the surface of a water, of a lake, is where the grind's going on. The time, the effort, a lot of unpaid, jobs of going to a practice, going to this event or that. And the thing is, when I got into it, not saying I was naive or anything, I was eager to do it because I said, look, I have a passion for sports. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect in this business. And I still am learning and growing even now at my point in my career, because I'm still like a sponge trying to take different things from different elements of sports coverage, whether it's a play-by-play or broadcasting or reporting, and trying to, form it into my comfort level. And coming into this business, it took a long time. It took a long time to earn the respect of those around me. I was a bit naive in how I approached certain things because I was younger at the time and stuff. Not saying I was trying to be a hotshot or anything, but you kind of learn as you go on your own. So you're kind of thrown into the jungle, figure yourself how to get out of this jungle to become where you want to be, and that's what it was. And I got lucky where I had people who believed in what I was doing, or what I'm doing right now, I beg your pardon, and took me under their wing and taught me the ropes of this is how you do it, this is how you approach it. When you prep for an event, you go to practice to get a feel for that, whether it's a university, sage up, or professional practice. You need to get a feel for it, because if you go in, Blake, it's like going into an exam cold without studying or going to class. You can't do that, right? You need to go to class at least to get a feel for the curriculum and to get ready for that exam. And it's the exact same thing for a sporting event, where you need to get a feel for what you're doing, because if you don't, people are going to poke holes right away in your display of work. And that's where the grind went into it, right? The long days, whether it was going to a practice in minus 25-degree weather in a January month at 6:30 in the morning to go watch a basketball practice, because you need to get a feel for it. And I was lucky enough that, again, develop that rapport with coaches and players. They allowed me to come and understand from afar and take notes and ask them questions afterwards. So in reality, as glamorous as this position can be, if you get to that level of success, it's really a grind job where you're going through a lot of feces, more or less, and pretty much trying to get through that tunnel of hell to get to that point. And I've been lucky. Like I would never trade that away for where I am now, because it humbled me. It got me to where I'm at. And I'm lucky that I had people who have gone to bat for me, who believe in my skills, to say, look, this guy is grinding, and he may not be perfect, but at least he knows and he gets the job done times 100 to make sure that it's ready to go when he's called upon.
I mean, and I think that comes through when you listen to, either whether it's you're commentating on a game, or, I hear you on the radio talking, or even when you're doing those little FPF Shoutcasts, which I find are hilarious, because I think it really, especially in the FPF, I think what that's done is really kind of give that recreational league a professional feel. And I think that's one of the main successes as to why it's so popular, is because it's something when you're just going to play for fun, but when you're going to play for fun and you feel like somebody's watching, you feel like when you do something good, it gets highlighted.
Right.
And then I don't know how many guys you guys have in the league. It's got to be up in the hundreds of guys who are playing on the different levels. So just in that, having everybody come and watch, your cast when you're talking about, these guys should make it, these guys shouldn't, this guy's not that great, this guy's a good quarterback, I think it just does a real service to it, and just makes it feel, it gives those guys who never got a chance to experience that level of, interaction and being on TV or video. It gives them that good feeling, kind of pissed me off sometimes, because the guys are highlighting showboating, and I'm like, dude, the game's not over yet. Would you just stop? Come on, act like you've been here before. But
I'll tell you this, Blake, for Flag Plus football, it's more challenging for me because I'm not dealing with professionals.
Right.
I'm dealing with 9-to-5s, right? and I'm not saying that they're more sensitive, but they're definitely more thin-skinned. And when the show that we try to employ is like, to use a line that I heard last week, which best describes the show that I work with Alex Dacula and Paulo Della Rocca, we're a dysfunctional pirate ship with a clown car attitude, right? That's what we are. and the thing is, that's, for me, FPF's more challenging, because the reality is people fail to understand that obviously we're having fun. That's the whole point of the show. But the problem is that a lot of these guys who play whatever, quarterback, receiver, whatever it is, DB, they take it too personally, saying, "Oh, this
do they ever?
You know, like it's one of those things." I'm like, "Oh, dude, like it's like, dude, like you're not pro." And the thing is, like, hey, we want to come on. We want to come on. Okay, cool. We get them on, and they have nothing to say. And I always tell like my colleagues, I go, guys, it's tough for me to extract an answer from these guys because they're not professional athletes that understand the environment they're going into.
Right.
And it becomes a challenge. And that's why I always say, if we're going to have on, like, you know, whether it's you, Blake, or someone that's going to be personable, that's going to have fun with it, yes, I'm all on board. But if they're going to be, you know, constipated in their answers, then it becomes very uncomfortable and becomes not an enjoyable interview subject for us.
I can imagine.
So that's why it's fun because it's different for me, because doing professional is one thing. Doing university stage is another thing. But doing this is definitely a different animal in its own right. And that's why, as I said before, it's a dysfunctional pirate ship with a clown car attitude that we have rolling around, you know, from one show to another show every week.
Right. And so, like, jumping back to professional. So, like you said, you got guys who are like verbally constipated when it comes to, you know, trying to talk. What happens? Like, what do you guys feel like when you get a guy like Marshawn Lynch, who is like notoriously known for like not really wanting to be a part of the media, but literally would just show up because, you know, it's part of his contract. He has to sit there. He has to answer some questions, but you can tell he doesn't want to be there. So, like, when you're trying to do your job and you're trying to ask somebody questions, and you're not trying to be a dick about stuff, but you know, the idea is to get information, and you want to obviously get information that other people don't have, because if you're just writing or reporting the same thing that the next guy next to you is going to report, it's like, okay, cool, yeah, sure. But so, like, when you're dealing with guys who you feel like are just either they're not receptive, they're not answering you, they're not, you know what I mean, they're not really giving you any kind of insight. How do you deal with that kind of scenario?
Well, see, if it was a one-on-one with Marshawn, I would ask him something Oakland related.
Right.
You know, something that can connect with them. You know, like, hey, did you hear the latest song from E40? You know, being an East Bay guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of want to open him up a little bit, right, with something that's outside the box. Because a guy like him, he's well-spoken. He's got a lot on his mind.
He really does.
But you just got to get the right combo lock to unlock that door, pretty much.
Right.
And to get him to open up. So in the case of a guy like Marshawn Lynch, again, it's all a matter of the timing of when you have him. And if you can get that question in, if you can get that one quick, easy softball for him, that will open him up to say, okay, you know what? All right, I feel this guy or this reporter, I beg your pardon, let's talk, right?
Right.
So in the case of Marshawn, I would ask him something East Bay related. And I think that's where, and that's the problem. I'm not saying it's a problem or anything, but I think that's where a lot of the media, there's a disconnect of trying to understand athletes and where they come from.
Right.
And where they're raised and how they are and who raised them and what they did or whatever it is. And that's where there's a big chasm with that type of environment where it's straight reporter ready to go, okay, well, you had 200 yards rushing and 4 fumbles. Why? Well, let's ask him an easier question. Ask him an easier question, right? This kind of loosen up the environment, make it at ease for him.
Yeah.
Therefore, he's going to say, you know what? All right, let's have fun with this. And enjoy this moment of media scrum with the guys who are here. Because, again, a guy like Marshawn Lynch, he's very complex or guarded, I beg your pardon, with what he is. But if you can get that question in that is going to relate to him, he's going to open up, and then that's when the fun will begin with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes total sense. It's just like I said, you see so many athletes who are I don't want to say they're misrepresented, but you can kind of see in certain cases how someone's taken liberty to make a more controversial opinion about whatever it is they're writing about or reporting on about certain guys. I remember there was like I don't know if you watched the Athletes podcast, Chad Johnson.
Yeah, with Channing Crowder and all those guys.
Yeah, exactly. So you hear a lot of their stories about them talking, and like, you know, obviously, listen, Chad Johnson was Chad Johnson. He was a human highlight reel on and off the field. You know what I mean? He was a character, but that's where he made his money. is that he was a character. And then you got guys like Brandon Marshall who did the same thing. I think Brandon Marshall was one of those guys who was very misunderstood because of his social anxiety disorder, because of his bipolarism, his depression and stuff. I think he was very misunderstood when he was in the league and when people would ask him questions, because he would be very, I don't want to say he was combative when he would talk, but you could tell he was very defensive when he would be talking to people.
Right.
So I can only imagine how hard it probably is for you to get some information from some people and then have to deal with, it's just, I guess you guys never really know what you're going to get out of somebody until you actually sit down with them and be like, okay, let me talk to this dude and let me figure this out. Because
I'll tell you a funny story about Chad Johnson, right? So Chad came to Montreal in the summer of 2011.
Yeah, he did. I remember that.
And he tweeted out, hey, come to Montreal, right? And so I remember it was a Sunday night, and I was at flag football, ironically enough, and I just finished up. And so a referee goes, hey, are you going to go interview Chad Johnson? I go, I don't know, man. Like, it's tough. I don't know what's going to do. I don't know what to do. And he goes, dude, he's going to be at the airport. Go. Like, just go. If he's there, he's there. If he's not, he's not. I was like, all right, cool. I'll go. So I ended up going with two other guys to Trudeau Airport at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And Chad rolls out, whatever. I go, listen, Chad, man, can I get you on the radio on Tuesday? And, it was 1 o'clock. He was tired. He's like, listen, man, not right now. We can talk tomorrow, whatever, and go from there. And I'll be at this spot. I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. So Monday rolls, do the podcast. Ironically enough, it's 9 o'clock. Chad's going to post, I'm going to be here at this time. And he posts, he's going to be downtown. So I go to the spot. I go, Chad, I've been chasing you for 2 days now. Can I please get you on the radio? He goes, no problem. I'll follow you on Twitter. You follow me, whatever. I go, no problem. We got him on air, right? And we got him on the Tuesday of that week. He flew out to Kansas City to go watch an MLS game. Came on for 20 minutes, whatever. It was great, whatever, right? And I thought that would be it for Chad and I. And then fast forward to 2014, what happens? He gets signed by the Alouettes.
That's true.
And then a buddy of mine, Anthony Claro, he goes, look, Mo, do you mind coming with me to this Alouettes golf event? Nothing to do with media, to show up. I just need you to come help me with some things. I'm like, all right, no problem. I go, hey, if I see Chad, I'll introduce you to him. So he's all right, cool. So next thing you know, I see who on the parking lot? Chad Johnson. I go, hey, Chad. He's like, oh, man, what's going on? Good to see you again. Like, DAP and all that. And I go, hey, listen, this is my buddy Anthony Claro. And I know Chad. The thing is, Chad Johnson is a huge soccer guy. Huge soccer guy. Like, huge, okay? So I said, okay, let me break the ice. I go, hey, Chad, I know you're a big Real Madrid fan and a big Cristiano Ronaldo fan and a big Napoli fan. My buddy here is a Barcelona fan. So after he daps my buddy Anthony like this, he just stops cold. And he looks at him and he's like, what the bleep? Get the bleep out of here, bro. And that's how they connected, right? Like for a few minutes and stuff.
Right.
And that's the thing. Again, it goes back to my whole point of like, you just got to figure out that athlete's personality outside of what they do. And that's how you sort of develop that rapport and that bond with that athlete. And luckily, Chad and I still follow each other on Twitter or whatever. But I think back to those two moments where I was trying to grind my way to get that interview with them, which I did. And then 3 years later, he remembers me. And then, hey, we connected for a few more minutes on that topic of soccer.
Right. That's awesome. But I guess that's like you said, it's all about those interpersonal relationships and kind of having it. Obviously, it's a job and it's your profession. But I think when you're leading with your passion and your emotion, I think what you do is you make real connections with people, and people sense that.
Right.
They feel when you're just some commentator who's just trying to go through the motions and be like, hey, so we're talking to blah blah blah, and they ask these hollowed questions that you're like, oh, okay, whatever, sure, yeah, fine. But then when you have someone who like you said, asking about the Bay, they're asking about different interests that you have, and you share and you create that connection with them. That's when they trust you, and that's when they're like, okay, well, yeah, I like this guy. I can talk to this dude about stuff. I get it. Man, that's great. That's awesome. I never knew that part. Like, I always wondered how you get in on that side of the whole scheme, because reporting and telling stories is I find it's a lost art form, especially today. And coming in like sports or even regular news, just being able to put out information in a way where it doesn't seem biased or whatever I think it's probably one of the harder things that's going on right now, especially, with just the way social media is kind of taken over. But one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on today because I want to talk football, obviously.
For sure.
And you're all in the footballs, so you know what I mean. So, what's your impression of like 2020 this year? The way that like the NFL's going, the way that everything is. For me, I had a sports. She's a sports therapist, a mental coach for athletes, and I was asking her on the podcast, how do you prepare guys for this? Like, how do you prepare guys who, you know, it's hard enough being an athlete. You go through your regular week knowing, you know, you practice, you train, you get your body ready, get everything mentally ready, fired up and ready to go. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, COVID happens and it's like, okay, well, maybe I'll play this week. Maybe I won't play this week. Maybe I'm sick. Maybe I'm not sick. Like it's got to be such a roller coaster. And just seeing how many guys are getting injured this year, how the teams are delegating, changing tactics, practicing, like doing virtual practices over Zoom. I mean, the league's been so crazy up and down, like things, I don't know how you gauge, like, you know, or get a feel for it for the year on like what's going on.
Yeah, it was definitely different. I mean, the guys that I know who are in the NFL, who cover the NFL, same thing, right? It goes back to the point from a media perspective. Already the NFL minimizes media attendance. You can't watch a practice. They give you like 10-minute window, and then that's it. You go wait in some other room that's sort of secluded, and until they go, okay, well, now you can talk to the players, whatever it is. So already you're missing out on, you mentioned before, the connection, right? You're missing out on the chance to be at a practice, to get a feel for it, to get a feel for the players, the coaching staffs, and to understand what's going on in the prep work for week 6 of their game on a Sunday or Monday or Thursday.
Right.
And now in the world that we're in for COVID with NFL, it's very difficult because you don't know. Like every week we're always on pins and needles, and the things that made the NFL even more popular has been fantasy football.
Right.
So now that's become more of a forefront issue, not for NFL owners or players, but for fans saying, well, holy bleep, if Blake Butler is not going to play this Sunday, I got to go on the waiver wire to find someone else to replace him.
Yeah.
You know, that type of thing. Now that's where it's become now for the NFL. And in the case of the NFL and how they've approached this season, I think they felt that, not saying they were bulletproof, but I think they felt that they can ride the waves of what's going on with the pandemic, mm-hmm. and just adapt on the fly. And I think they realize now, like, holy bleep, we might be caught in a hurricane category 5 if we get more teams that cannot field a proper football squad on a Sunday that has to be delayed now by another week. Because now, Blake, the reality is, at the point that we're at, all the NFL teams are almost done their bye weeks, and there's no more to be had.
That's it,
and you don't want to add on to the end of the season, especially games that might not mean much for playoffs, but that can mean much for the draft order that they might pick in April. So, yeah, the NFL definitely has weathered the storm pretty decently, not well. And now, as we move into the final 2 months of the regular season, their focus, and praying to the pandemic gods, if that's the proper term to use, is that, yes, they'll like making a deal with the devil. Okay, we'll take 1 or 2 cases of COVID, mm-hmm. but just allow us to finish off this season where we can get through the 32 teams, and then it gets reduced to playoff numbers of whatever it might be, 14, and right. That's easier to handle because we can say, well, okay, guys, it's easier to do now, but do we go into a bubble format for this next month and just make sure we keep everyone clean and there's no one that's going to miss in a crucial football game of their lives because they had COVID and then becomes a false positive or false negative at that point. So yes, the NFL has done an okay job, but they're now going to an unknown territory of, well, are we going to have more cases? Will this be a forest fire that's going to result in more teams saying we can't play? And now we got to add on more weeks to the season.
Right.
And that's going to put more strain on everyone's bodies and mindsets that, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? And what do we say now moving towards the final 2 months of the season?
There's so many moving parts, dude, that like I can't even fathom about how they're keeping this whole like truck rolling every week in, week out. I mean, just having the draft the way it was, having training camp, like watching Hard Knocks, and seeing how, they took the facility outside. Everyone's in this gigantic room that they bought to house, like 80, 90 guys to have a meeting with. And there's 12 guys in the room and they're all separated. It's crazy how they've acclimated so quickly to get a plan in place to be like, no, we're good. We'll figure it out. We can pop it. We can get it done. We got a bunch of guys. We'll figure it out. We'll keep them separate, because obviously the thing, especially with COVID, is football is not a sport where you guys can stay separated, right? Like the game is contact. The game is that I'm going to run into you. You're going to run into me. That's it. And it's not like, I know at first they were talking about, integrating the N95 mask into the helmet. Well, you can't do that because a guy won't be able to breathe. It's not going to happen that way. So when they're throwing out all these theories about, well, they'll do this or they'll be completely covered or it's like, dude, you can't. It's the guys who are going to catch it, which is what we saw happen in Dallas, is the O-line. They're all breathe. The trenches is where you're going to have a problem. They're they're a yard and a half from each other. They're all breathing into each other. That's where the situation is going to happen. And that's what happened in Dallas, where everybody got it. Even in the case where Roethlisberger, tested positive for COVID. I don't know how they got him off the COVID list so quickly. They must have given him that super drug or whatever Trump got and said, no, we're good. He's fine. We're going to put him back on. But yeah, just the way that they've dealt with it in being different, because like we talked about basketball before in the NBA, they put all their guys under a bubble, like you said. So they segregated everybody away from the population. But football, you can't do that. 53-man roster, and then you got 30 teams in the league. Like, you can't bubble that many dudes. You can't. And then you have guys like, a lot of people don't understand about football is, your first 22 or say 30 some odd players are pretty much going to be the same consistent players. But everybody after that down the roster are going to be guys who come off a practice squad, who get off waivers, who have to fill positions. So it's like, you can't guarantee that those guys are going to be, where they're supposed to be and isolating themselves and not getting sick. So just the whole measure of how football, like how the NFL has managed to evaluate this and get it done, is like, I guess it's a testament to say, like, if there's money in it, we're going to get it done.
Well, there has to be, because football is a sport of human car crashes. That's what it is.
Well, that's it.
That's what it is. And in the case of the NFL, how much money is at stake? That's billions of dollars. There's so much money, TV money, sponsorship money. It's not the CFL. It's not,
betting money, fantasy money. Like,
absolutely. And they know that, hey, if we said no football this year, they're losing a lot of money, and owners don't care. And look, like, the reality is, if there is a vaccine that's going to come out in the next few months and that does work and does help, okay, great, we're all on board. But right now, we all have to operate on the premise that, like, we're in this situation. We got to continue evolving where we're wearing the mask, washing our hands, keeping our distance and stuff. And in the case of football, look, surprisingly enough, people are all so worried, pessimistic, saying, "Oh my God, we're going to have everyone in COVID." And look, we've had 4, 5, 6, 7 teams. There's no denying that.
Yeah,
but the NFL's overcome that now, and as I said to you before, my previous point, look, there's no more bye weeks, so now it's a question of how coaches, GMs, and teams now tell their players, look, guys, we understand it's already a unique situation. We can ill afford to have you guys contract or be in a situation where you are COVID positive, and now you got to sit out for a whole week. You can't practice, do your reps, and that's going to cost us a game on Sunday. So I think now players realize that the responsibility obviously is bearing on them, but they also got to be careful. If they're going to be at home with their family, their kids, their wife, their girlfriends, or they're going to go out, make sure you're careful and that you understand, if I'm in this situation, it goes back to my point of being in the picture of a background shot. You don't want to be in that situation where, oh my God, you were at this club and COVID was spread out, and guess what? You got it, and now your entire team has it, and guess what? You're not playing on week 16. We're gonna play this.
You mean you don't want to pull a Melvin Gordon, is what you're saying?
You don't, right? And like there's guys like Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley that went out, after a practice or after a game, or whatever it was, on a Monday night in New York, and there's pictures of them, and then the NFL investigating, saying, "Listen, guys, what are you doing?" Right? The Las Vegas Raiders, same thing, right? Darren Waller's hosting a charity event, which was maskless. So all these Raider guys are coming through. Hey, please welcome Derek Carr. Please welcome this guy and that guy. So then the NFL fines the Raiders for their insubordination of having their players not respect what they're trying to employ. So yeah, the NFL definitely will lay down the lumber. Look, the Raiders lost a 6th-round pick and got fined a lot of money for not respecting the bylaws of the NFL for now.
Yeah.
So it's all on the responsibility of coaches, staff members, and the players to understand their situation. And dude, like, once the NFL season is done, then do whatever you want to do. Okay, go on a train and write it down. The Reals, no problem. But once you're in the NFL, man, just respect the rules. And whether you make it to the Super Bowl or not, just respect it, and then do what you got to do once you're done playing football for that season.
Yeah, that's very much true. All right, so to delve a little bit more into football, so if people are bored enough football, that's too bad. That's just how it is. Our Canadian boy, Chase Claypool, is absolutely just a behemoth of a man to start off with. And
he's like a poor man's you, Blake, in your prime of football.
I'm like a half of him. Like, I am nowhere close to the level of talent that this kid is. But my whole thing is, I guess because we've watched football for so long and played for so and I played like college and everything and really got into it. I just don't understand how teams just let this kid go, like in the draft. I was like, when I looked at his, because I love watching the draft. I love watching the combine. I love these things. When I watch this kid and I'm looking at him, I'm like, he's 6'4", he's 230 some odd pounds. The kid runs like a sub 4.4, 4.3. Like, he jumps out of the gym. He's got hands, and he's smart as shit. He went to Notre Dame. I'm like, what more do you want out of it? How do you let this kid drop to the second? Would they picked him up in the 2nd or 3rd round?
2nd round, yeah. I think it was like 45th, 46th.
I was like, guys, this is your kid Megatron right here. What? How do you keep letting Pittsburgh pick these guys up and get these receivers who are just like, who end up becoming like the best receivers in the league? I'm just like, I don't get it from that standpoint, because like, even for me, like, I'm not a scout. I don't watch film all the time anymore, everything. But just after looking at like his college film, watching like the stuff breakdown, I'm like, guys, this kid's like he's like the top 3 receiver. I'm like, it must be because he's Canadian. That's why they didn't. That's why they didn't. He's Canadian. They didn't want him.
For Chase Claypool, no one knew his position, his true value at position. Some thought he would be a tight end, and that's where people were kind of concerned, saying, well, can he adjust to being a NFL tight end, not a college football style tight end? I think there was the fact that teams, I know DK Metcalf kind of defied the stereotype of 6'4", chiseled muscle head football player, right? Because
I'll be honest with you, dude, I didn't think he was going to be very good at all.
No, neither did I. I thought with his neck issues and stuff, and
for me, it wasn't his neck issues. I was watching him, like, just watching his film and watching him run routes. Obviously, it was the system he was in was very. It was very one dimensional. Like, we're running stops or goes. That's what we're running. So when I was watching this guy run, I'm like, he's not very malleable in the hips. Like, he does his stop move or he does his go move, but like his in routes are like mad or whatever. And I was like, okay, he's huge, he's jacked, but he runs fast. So I thought, okay, he's just going to be another fast guy in the league. But then watching him work with Russell Wilson and watching the routes and the things he's pulling off, I'm like, this guy's a freak of nature. Like, you can't guard this. Like, you can barely guard this dude. He's like,
yeah, for sure. And I think the same thing applied to Chase Claypool, where they kind of fall into that former NFL player category, David Boston. Remember him?
Oh my God. Yeah,
like he came into the NFL like a little bit skinnier than usual. Then he put on the muscle, and then he became very immobile because the muscle stiffened up his body, right? And he got
on so much juice. He was part of that football era where guys were just getting unbelievably big.
Supposedly, whatever it might have been, whatever you're thinking at the time, and that's where I think the stereotype comes in for a guy like Chase Claypool. Not that he's David Boston, but the size that he's at, right? He's 6'5", 240. Running a 4.45, but does that translate well at the NFL level? And you go to a team like Pittsburgh, which is well coached in terms of the development process. Like if Chase Claypool went to the Jets,
oh my God,
it's also the luck of where you land as an athlete in a draft, regardless of sport.
Right.
And for Chase Claypool to, sure, you want to be a first-round pick because it's the guaranteed money. It's the fact that you were the top 32 to be picked in the professional world of football at the highest level.
Right.
But the reality is that, you go second round, you go to a team like Pittsburgh, or you go to a team like Seattle or Kansas City that's going to develop you and hone your skills. I'd rather be in that position. And for Chase, given that this dude can box out players, he runs decent routes, he's got strong hands,
blocks linebackers.
Exactly. And look, he high points a lot of his catches and stuff. And it's not that he can't jump. He jumps, right? This guy's got vertical leaps that puts him through the roof. That makes him a special talent. And in the case that he's at in Pittsburgh, he landed at the right spot at the right time, where whether Big Ben's going to throw to him next year, who knows? But he's now in an environment that's going to utilize his skill sets to the full maximum. And once his 4-year rookie deal is done, he's going to earn that money for his second contract. Knock on wood, he's health and is A-okay. That he's going to earn that second contract that's going to pay him like a top-end receiver. And remember, we're talking in 4 years, and the value of every position group is minus this year because of the flat line cap, but the value of every inflation of position groups out there will go up by 5 to 10%. So that by the time he hits that free agent mark, whether it's in year 3 or year 4, whether he gets an extension or not, or waits it out, his value, guaranteed money-wise, will be double what the guarantee money is now for an NFL athlete at that position.
Right. And it's going to be interesting to see, especially for him, because Pittsburgh has that endearing quality where they don't like to pay guys. They don't like to open up the checkbook very much. They like to kind of keep everybody on that even keel and be like, we're going to pay you. We're not going to pay you, like, we're not going to give you Julio Jones money, that kind of thing, and and give you all the cash, but we're going to give you money and make you comfortable. That was the problem with Antonio Brown to a certain extent. That was the problem with Le'Veon Bell. Those guys, obviously, a little bit of attitude issues were also a part of it. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And I hope that kid keeps growing and keeps doing better, because I think, especially in cases where you get those Canadian boys who go and excel in the NFL, I think it only helps the rest of the kids who are here, because it shows that the caliber of football player we're creating in Canada is on par with the ones in the States. We may not have as many, we may not run the same system, but the athleticism and the endearment and the ability to put those guys in American colleges, have them excel, and then play in the NFL. It's great to see guys coming from all parts of Canada and really being able to compete at the highest level. The one other thing I wanted to talk to you about was kind of along the draft thing. So Trevor Lawrence is probably going to be the guy this year. He's going to be the next big draft. He's going to be the next big QB. He's going to be the number 1 pick overall. I was listening to ESPN radio, and they were talking about him, where he could fall, all that kind of stuff. And what I'm wondering is, do you think there's any chance that Trevor Lawrence pulls an Eli Manning? Well, here's the thing. This is a thing that I'm like, I ponder a lot when I start thinking about drafts and all this kind of stuff and everything. Is I feel like this is going to be the next thing that is going to start to take place for players. Is that when guys excel to a level like Trevor Lawrence has, where he's been top 2, top 3 quarterback, I think since his sophomore year, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. I feel like there's going to be a movement where these guys are going to start trying to dictate where they're going to go, or maybe not where they're going to go, but where they don't want to go. So like guys not wanting to end up, because right now they have them. If I think the first pick goes to New York. I think
right now, if you look at tankathon.com, the Jets are the first pick. Jaguars 2, Washington 3, Dallas 4 right now.
That's it. So in the case where they already drafted Sam Darnold, maybe they take him, maybe they trade that pick because they already have Darnold or whatever. But if you're Trevor Lawrence, and this is a conversation I was having with a buddy of mine, like, you got to think about it this way. You gave everything to be arguably the best quarterback in the nation, best quarterback on the planet in college. there should be some kind of like leeway that you have where you can say like, listen, I am the best there is right now.
Mm-hmm.
I should have some kind of control to at least say, I don't want to go to a team that is literally going to tank themselves for the next 4.5 years because they can't get their front office in order. Their head coach is not a coach that I can work with. All those kind of scenarios. Like for me, I always look at Eli and the way that the Mannings handled that scenario as kind of like this could be the blueprint for how guys will kind of dictate their own position in the draft to assure, and even to a lesser extent, Lamar Jackson, how Lamar Jackson came out, and a lot of teams when he was going to be drafted came out and said like, well, we want you to come and run your 40. We want you to come and catch some balls. And he's like, I'm not doing that. He's like, either I'm going to be a quarterback or I'm not playing. He's like, you're going to draft me as a QB. Let me be a QB. And then if I fail at being a QB, we'll talk. But I'm not coming in there so that you can turn me into a Slash or an Edelman or something like that, where I played college, I played quarterback in college, and now you turn me into a receiver or a gadget player. Like, I'm sure everyone's looking for the next Hill who plays on the Saints there. Like, everybody would love a guy like that. But, I mean, he is a freak of nature in its own. But yeah, I wanted to bring that up to you and hear what you had to say about that, or what your feeling is on that. Like, do you think there's ever going to be a position where guys are going to start to kind of dictate their draft position?
Blake, the NFL out of the 4 leagues, major leagues, or if you want to include MLS out of 5 major leagues, is probably the weakest of the unions, the players association groups, right? And now player power is starting to become more prevalent. It's much more effective now in the NBA, where players are dictating where they're going to go, who they're going to sign, who do you bring in, who do you hire, whatever it is. I think the NFL now, and Trevor Lawrence will be now the new case study for people who are watching this from afar, saying, well, here he is. He hasn't decided yet. He has not hinted if he's going to go or not, if he's going to declare for the NFL draft. And the beauty of what he has is that if the Jets are going to be the number 1 pick, and it looks like they are the inside horse to get that number 1 pick, if they don't hire the right coach, if they don't hire the right GM, will probably be there, but if they don't hire the right coach, have the right staff in place.
Yeah, because they got to get rid of Gase.
Right, and Adam Gase knows that. Like, they're going to keep him because they're losing, and they'd rather lose with him than have an interim come in and win 2, 3, 4 games in a row.
Right.
In the case of the Jets, if they keep with what they have, and they don't hire an Eric Bieniemy or Joe Brady or an innovative offensive mind that's going to help cultivate Trevor Lawrence's skill sets to become a franchise quarterback, all-pro, decade player for the next 10 to 20 years. He's got, I believe, 10 days to decide to declare, am I going to the NFL draft? And if he sees the Jets aren't going to make that pick of the right coach, he can bleep and say, you know what, I'll come back for my senior year at Clemson and play it out. Right. Because Peyton Manning, the story with him, not Eli, but Peyton, back in 1997, right? People were saying he's going to declare for the draft as a junior and be the first overall pick. And who had that pick? The New York Jets had that pick, led by Bill Parcells. And they were coming off a 1-15 year under Rich Kotite, which was a complete toxic dump of septic hell for them. And the thing was, the story allegedly was that Manning did not want to go to the Jets, whether it was Parcells or not, because he felt that they were not going to make him or work his skills to become an all-pro quarterback. Right. And that's why he came back for his senior year at Tennessee and then ended up going to the Colts with the number 1 pick the following year. So, yes, player power is there, but the question for Trevor Lawrence is he comfortable enough to say, you know what, I'm going to forego my senior year, enter the draft, and go to a franchise in the last, minus the back-to-back years of going to the AFC title game in 10 and 11, really has been mediocre, if not subpar, of a franchise.
Right.
And now is he going to commit himself at minimum 5 years of his youth to perhaps become an all-pro quarterback or become the next Sam Darnold, and not in a good way, where he gets run out of town and he's traded in year 4 of his rookie contract because they deem him as being useless trash for their future look of the franchise.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's to me, it's just as being like a football head, like it's just very interesting to see are they good? Like, is there going to be some proponent where players are really going to be able to control, or at least, make those business? Because someone brought it up to me in a really interesting way. He's like, if you look at a player as a business, if you say he's a small business and you look at NFL teams as a big business, right? They're providing a service to these big businesses so that they can make more money. Mm-hmm. In a case where you would have a business transaction, the small business would sit down with the big business and they would discuss, does this work? Are we good? Is this going to be, is this going to be a good fit? Are we, is this going to be a good plan? And if they decide, nah, it's not really going to be a good deal, they move on to another team. They'd move on to another one and say, okay, well, hey, maybe we can do business or whatever. Obviously, in the way that the NFL draft is worked, and it's very much owner controlled. That's the whole idea. They control the business. They control the transactions. The lottery's thrown up there first as to decide who's going to get the first pick to try to, keep the equality amongst the league so that one team, not like baseball where one team runs away with it for 10 years and then it's 10 years until something changes. I think football does that as one of the best leagues where they keep the level of competition fairly even. I mean, obviously teams tank, teams do well, but I think in the way that it's organized, they kind of assure that there will be fair competition amongst those 32 teams every year. Every team's going to have a decent shot. But yeah, for me, it's just going to be real interesting to see because I know Trevor Lawrence, at least from watching him on social media and stuff, that he's not necessarily outspoken, but you can tell the kid's got a real business drive when it comes to him and playing football. He knows what he's worth. He knows who he is. He's comfortable in his own skin. And I feel like he's going to be one of those guys who's like, I'm not going to play for the Jets, man. I'm sorry. I'm not going to waste the first couple of years of my career playing for a team that's just not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to do it. It's just not going to happen.
The sad part is, New York's a great city for marketing.
Yeah, for sure.
And the unfortunate part is that you have the Giants are a little bit better now, but two of the bottom feeder teams in the last 5 years.
My poor Giants.
Occupying the geography of the New York, New Jersey market.
My poor Giants. I will say, though, I am, and I don't mean this in a negative connotation, but I am so happy Saquon got hurt this year. Because the way that Saquon runs, Saquon is a physical cut runner, Barry Sanders-esque, once in a generational type guy. And the one thing I was so worried about for him for this year was that with minimal training camp, all these kind of things, he was going to be playing and basically wearing himself out just to get through this year to go to the next year. I'm sort of happy that he had, obviously you don't want these guys to have knee injuries. I feel but ACLs are injuries that guys usually can come back from, especially now with the technology and everything, pretty well. But I'm happy that he got to kind of take this year off. Daniel Jones gets to develop a little bit better. Hopefully he goes to a running coach and doesn't trip on the 20-yard line anymore. Of course. But I think with Saquon coming back, Slayton being a god, a receiver who came out of nowhere, nobody thought that this kid was that good. But how much he stepped up. Sterling Shepard's meh, he's a good Robin-esque, Batman. I consider him an okay guy, but their defense seems to be doing pretty well. I think when Saquon comes back next year and they get a couple more draft picks and a couple more guys in place, I think they'll actually do something good with that team, and that team will be competitive. Don't know if it's a playoff team, but they'll be better than a 2-14 team or a 5.
Yeah, they need to get some playmakers for Daniel Jones. If it's going to be Jamar Chase from LSU or Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle, who knows? But the Giants have a pretty decent defense. They'll probably fire David Gettleman, bring in another GM in there to work with Joe Judge.
Yeah,
and the two key position groups, I believe, will be their O-line to make sure you improve on the interior, and then of course with playmakers. If you get Daniel Jones, the playmakers to work with. I was telling a buddy of mine who's a big Giant fan. I said, Daniel Jones. It reminds me of how Joey Harrington was with the Detroit Lions back in the early 2000s, where they improved the O-line, they got all these pass catchers, and he couldn't do anything with it, right?
And he wasn't any better.
This wasn't any good at all. So I think for Daniel Jones, it's a critical off season for him. I know COVID took out his OTAs and all that.
Yeah,
this will be a critical year for him in his development. That you go into year 3, and Blake, you played football before. Year 1, rookie quarterback, you make your throws. That's all it is, right? Year 2, you're trying to make those third down conversions to pull along drives. Year three of your career, you're making franchise throws.
Yeah.
You get my point? Like, you're making throws that's going to win you football games, that you're talking about you're going to win now 10 to 12 games for the next 5 years of your pro career. So
that's it.
Year three will be, can he make those franchise throws? If he can't, John's going a different direction at quarterback in the next year or two.
100%. Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting, because that year one is just like get acclimated, get up to speed with how fast everybody else is moving.
Just make completions.
That's it. Year two is you got to mentally now be on par with everybody else. So it's like first year, like you'll play the physical game, much to like the example I always give is Lamar Jackson. If you look at, because a lot of teams would have ruined Lamar Jackson. Like they would have ruined his career just because they would have looked at him as an athlete, and they would have been like, yeah, we'll let him run some options and do some things, whatever. But I will always give Harbaugh the utmost of just like respect, because he took a guy who had 4.3 speed, who could run better than 90% of the running backs in the NFL, who has a pretty decent arm. Like he can sling the ball pretty well, and taught him how to be a quarterback. In a sense where he's playing on what he does well, but he's also teaching him how to read properly. Like there was a game, I think last year, where he completed, I forget, he had something like a 78%, and he completed to like 8 different receivers, didn't run that much, but like just the fact that they're getting him mentally into the space where he can be a real professional quarterback. Will he exceed that and become like, something with like, will he become like Randall Cunningham, who was a real runner at the beginning of his career, and then towards the end of his career, when he got with Chris Carter and Randy Moss, became like a full out passer and was launching balls 60, 70 yards down the field? Will he become that? I don't know, but it was just good for him to see that development, like you were talking about, to have him. Now defenses have caught up to him. He's not doing that great this year because everybody knows the scheme, but yeah, I totally get it. For sure. Cool. Hey, Mo, listen, I've always wanted to wax and talk football with you. I love your takes. I love whenever you're on. You got that unique voice.
Appreciate it, Blake.
Super unique voice. You're one of those guys who doesn't look like he's got ulterior motives when he's talking about sports. He's not trying to get, his own opinion out. He's just kind of calling it how he sees it. So I very much appreciate you taking, time out to just, talk with little old me and, out of your busy day and everything. Appreciate you, and I love you, and I love what you're doing, FPF and everything. And very much appreciate you coming on, buddy.
Thanks so much, Blake. An honor to come on. Anytime you want me to come on, feel free, man. And look forward to the podcast.
As soon as playoffs and everything come. Oh, quick! Who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl?
I'll make my pick in December.
All right.
It's just too hard now. Right. It's tough to tell, right?
Okay, so who do you think is going to be? Who's going to be the top teams in each conference?
I believe for the AFC, Pittsburgh will be the obvious choice. Kansas City, those are the 1-2s.
Yeah.
And the NFC, it's a bit more wide open. I think Green Bay will be there.
Okay.
I don't know if they're one yet. I think either one or two. They're that minimum 2.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious now to see how the Saints will react with Jameis Winston at the quarterback position for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And if they can come out of it 2-1, 3-0. And then I'll put the Saints in that bracket because they know this is it for Drew Brees. If they can't win it now, they may not win it for a very long time.
Yeah, this is it for him. I don't think he can take too many injuries.
No,
he makes it halfway through season now, and then needs someone to come in. They're doing the Eagles method, where what's his name gets injured halfway through the season, and they let Nick Foles take over the rest of the year. Should have kept him. Probably would have won another Super Bowl.
Oh, that's unknown. That's the unknown answer to that question.
All right, Mo. Thanks so much. Appreciate you, buddy.
Always, Blake.
Been the Uncommon Sense podcast with the great Moe Kahn. Thanks, buds.